Hi, good morning. Rather good afternoon. So, in the last class, we had gone ahead and we had talked about the last topic that we had covered. It was budget line, right? And since we have now defined the different kind of indifference curve, and we have gone ahead and we have defined what is a budget line, the topic that I would like to go ahead and I would like to begin with, that is basically consumer equilibrium. So what we will do, how we will take today's lecture, we will go ahead and we will start by discussing consumer equilibrium for the usual case, for the well-defined preferences. I will give you some important pointers also, like what are the advantages, how is it similar with the cardinal approach we had done, what is the criticism. And then I will quickly take you through other consumer equilibrium. Like, how do you solve for consumer equilibrium if you have, say, for example, if you have perfect complements, if you have substitutes, and if you have concave function. So the aim of the lecture is to go ahead and take you through different types of consumer equilibrium today. First of all, we will do it for well-defined preferences. Right? Okay, try to understand. Well-defined preferences were those preferences where we had this a good enough indifference curve, which was a downward sloping convex indifference curve. So, for example, if I go ahead and I give you a budget line, right? This is M by Px, this is M by Py, this is good X, and this is good Y. And I asked you, which is the highest indifference curve that you can go ahead and achieve? What will you do, beta? You will start with this indifference curve, IC1. Then you will tell me I can go to higher indifference curve. I can go to higher indifference curve and so on and so forth. We are looking to reach the highest indifference curve possible. हमें वो indifference curve को reach करना है, which is the highest IC. So this would be the highest indifference curve that the consumer can reach. At this IC, at this indifference curve, the property that we have, that is the property of tangency. Tangency का क्या मतलब है? What is the meaning of tangency? By tangency, I mean that the slope of indifference curve and the slope of budget line, both of them would be equal to each other. So tangency is that point at which slope of indifference curve and budget line, they are equal to each other. Now, the slope of indifference curve is marginal rate of substitution. We have studied this. The slope of budget line is Px by Py. I am taking them in absolute value, beta. Absolute माने positive value में ही लेंगे. So wherever MRS is equal to Px by Py, that becomes the first order condition of your consumer equilibrium. This becomes your first order condition of consumer equilibrium. Now, additionally, we have second order condition. The second order condition requires that my indifference curves should be convex to origin. So when I say that my indifference curve should be convex, what do I mean? It means that I should be having ICs which look like this. ऐसे IC होंगे सिर्फ तब कंज्यूमर का मैक्सिमा इस पॉइंट पर होगा where MRS will be equal to PX by PY. If my indifference curve don't look like this, so for example, if I tell you that your ICs are concave, अगर indifference curve कुछ ऐसे लगेंगे, if these are your kind of indifference curve that you have, then what will happen? Suppose I draw a budget line. This is my budget line. मैंने वही क्वेश्चन आपसे पूछा, what is the highest indifference curve that you can reach? So you will start with this indifference curve. ये यहाँ पे tangency हो रहा है. You're meeting at the point of tangency. But is this the highest indifference curve you can reach? No, I can go higher. This is also within my budget. It is touching the budget line. I can go higher. This is also within my budget. It's touching the budget line. I can go higher. This point also touches my budget line. So it means that in cases when I have concave indifference curve, my equilibrium is not at the point of tangency, but at these extreme points. These are called as extreme points. This point is telling me, if you remember, that I am consuming all of good eggs. मैं सिर्फ good eggs consume कर रही हूँ. And this point was telling me that I am consuming all of good Y. So try to understand here that we are saying that in this case, our equilibrium is not at the point of tangency. Similarly, books will show you a diagram like this. Like for example, if this is my budget line, and let's say that this is my indifference curve. ऐसा दिखता है कुछ indifference curve. Then you try to understand that at the ये भी tangency, it is just touching the IC exactly at one point. तो tangent है. So I am asking you that, is this the point of equilibrium? Is this my equilibrium point? Answer is no. Why? Because I can go to higher indifference curve. A similar indifference curve can be drawn from here. And when I will go to a higher indifference curve, you can see that this point I am also convex. मेरा shape ऐसा हो रहा है. I am convex. Here also I am convex. So this is the highest indifference curve I am reaching. And here I am also tangent. I am just touching the budget line at one point. I am tangent, right? The slopes are equal, right? So we can say that although here also the tangency is achieved, MRS and price ratio are equal to each other, because you see that the line and IC are just touching each other exactly at once. So yes, we are tangent, but this is not equilibrium. Right? Because at this point, we are becoming concave. This is concave. This is convex. So I am concave to origin. So this is not the highest point I can reach. Okay. Now let us try to understand some of the advantages of this method. So try to understand now, beta. We have understood two ways of finding consumer equilibrium. The first method we used was cardinal approach. And the second method we used was ordinal approach. In the cardinal method approach, जब हम ये cardinal method approach use कर रहे थे, we used the concept of law of equimarginal utility. तो हमने ये use किया था. We used this. MUX by PX is equal to MUM. MUX by PX is equal to MUY by PY is equal to MUM. And then हमने इसका बहुत सारा disadvantage लिखा था. We had written that it is impossible to calculate utility. Utility को calculate करना is impossible. That's a wrong thing that we are saying. So we went ahead and we did things through this ordinal approach now. We said कि कहाँ पे consumer would be finding his equilibrium. That will be where his MRS will be equal to PX by PY. By the way, it is very interesting to see that this part actually leads you to this part. देखो ध्यान से. If I have MUX by PX equal to MUY by PY, can't I just rewrite this thing as MUX by MUY is equal to PX by PY? So MRS equal to PX by PY. So somehow economists learn from each other, right? While developing the theory of ordinality and consumer equilibrium, in the background, we have learned a lot from the cardinal approach also. So what are the advantages of ordinal approach? Why should we go ahead and why should we be using the ordinal approach? So the first one is that we can drop the assumption of cardinality. The very assumption that, I need to go ahead and I need to calculate number, utility के लिए number चाहिए होंगे. So for example, I will have to make something like this. कि marginal utility, suppose is 10, PX is 5, MUM is 2. The very fact कि मुझे ये सब निकालना पड़ेगा. What is MUX by PX? Here it is coming 2. So this is equal to MUM. So this is my equilibrium. Suppose this happens at 5 units. So I will consume 5 units. The very fact that I have to calculate utility in terms of this number, right? This is now dropped. So I can relax myself that how I will be going ahead and calculating these numbers of utility. Secondly, we are now able to go ahead and drop the assumption of constant MUM. So we said that our marginal utility of money is assumed to be constant while doing the cardinal approach. And that itself is a very big issue, right? मैंने आपको बताया था कि money should be treated like any other good and its marginal utility should not be constant. But the very fact that we are assuming marginal utility constant, that was a problem with cardinal utility. तो अब वो drop कर दी गई है. अब we are relaxed. क्योंकि देखो इस approach में nowhere we are talking about MUM. We are not worried about the marginal utility of money anymore. Okay. The third one is that we have now greater insights into price effect, substitution effect, and income effect. So try to understand. Dekho, when we were going ahead and when we were doing this cardinal approach now, and we had gone ahead and we had derived the demand curve, MUX by PX, MUM. हमने demand curve जब derive किया था using this approach, at that point हमने उसके disadvantage में we had gone ahead and we had written this disadvantage that it does not consider how price effect can be decomposed into substitution and income effect. And udhar, I had gone ahead and I had told you that we will talk about the substitution and income effect in detail later on. Just for now, just remember कि इन सब चीजों की बात नहीं करता. It does not talk about substitution effect, income effect, etc., etc. Now we are going ahead and we are saying that when we talk about the ordinal approach, It actually goes ahead and talks about all these things, which I will be doing in maybe the next or next to next class. We will be talking about substitution effect and income effect and so on and so forth. तो इसके बारे में we go ahead and we talk about this in this case, in the ordinal approach, जो हम वहां नहीं करते हैं, right? Fourth is that it gives more general and adequate demand theory. So it is able to define demand in a better way than the cardinal utility was able to go ahead and define. Fifth, the hypothesis of independent utility is now given up. So if you remember, हमने यहाँ पर एक hypothesis दी थी independent utility की. Under the cardinal approach, we had gone ahead and we had taken this hypothesis कि utility from A, B, C will be utility from A plus B plus C. And then we had written this in the disadvantages also. इसी को हमने disadvantage में भी लिखा था that this is an incorrect thing to do. How will we treat goods which are complementary, which are to be consumed together, which affect each other? How will we treat goods which are substitute goods? So this hypothesis was assuming that goods are independent of each other. But that is not the case in the real world. So now we don't have to anymore assume that. When we talk about the ordinal approach, as I told you, I will do the case when we have perfect complements. I will do the case of substitutes. I will do the case of concave preferences and so on and so forth. So this ordinal approach, it works well for all cases. कोई भी तरीके का utility function होगा, it will be working well. Unlike the case of your cardinal approach, which assumed that you have independent utilities. Okay, at last, हमने वहां लिखा था, we had written this quote that more assumptions, less explanation. This is the opposite of that. So we will write few assumptions. There are very less assumptions we have to make here. And there is more explanation. So we are able to explain more and we need to assume less. That is a benefit of this case. Now, let us try to see. So we have seen the advantages, some similarities with Marshallian analysis. What are some of the similarities that we have with the Marshall case? So in both the cases, we assume consumer is rational. There also we assumed ki rational consumer. Here also we are assuming rational consumer. Second, in both cases, we assume diminishing marginal utility. That case also we assumed that marginal utility is diminishing, and here also we are assuming that marginal utility is diminishing. And third, psychological introspective method. So I had gone ahead and explained you what is psychological introspective method. Now I am saying that this psychological introspective method, this is actually common for both, right? We can go ahead and use this in both the cases, right? Okay. Now let us go ahead and let us try to understand what are some of the criticisms that we have. When we talk about criticisms, देखो, किसी भी मेथड में, whatever you do in economics, even if it is the best thing defined in economics, कोई ना कोई criticism होगा ही होगा. There will be some criticisms that will exist in any theory you read. Any theory, कोई भी मॉडल ले लो. You read Solow model, Harry-Domer model, Lewis model, or basic things like ordinal theory, cardinal theory. Everything will have some criticism to it. Critics are always there. In life also, critics will always be there. कोई ना कोई तो होगा who will criticize you, who will be there to criticize you. So when we talk about criticism, the first criticism is unrealistic assumption that consumer possesses complete knowledge about his indifference. बहुत ही unrealistic. मतलब today if I ask you, or I mean you are an economic student, but suppose I go to a village, और उस village में जाके I just ask that person, draw your indifference curve, tell me about your preferences. It will be very difficult for a layman to present his preferences to you. He cannot, right? So this is such an unrealistic assumption to assume that a consumer will be completely aware, उसको अच्छे से पता होगा about his indifference curve, about his preferences. So this is